welcome everyone to AARP Wyoming's Video Voter Guide Series for 2024. I'm Tom Laycock with AARP Wyoming, and today we're joined by Bill Winney, who's running for the Wyoming Legislature in Senate District 14, located in parts of Sweetwater, Lincoln, and Uinta counties. AARP has a proud 40-year history of nonpartisan voter engagement and does not endorse or oppose candidates. Nor does AARP make contributions to political campaigns or candidates at any level. Instead, we ask questions so our members understand where the candidates stand on important issues and can make their own decisions on Election Day. Today, we'll ask Mr. Winney 3 questions, allowing for a 1-minute and 30-second response to each. Then we'll give Mr. Winney 2 minutes to make his pitch to the voters of Senate District 6. Mr. Winney, our first question for today. Over the last 2 years, the Wyoming Legislature has made providing property tax relief to its citizens a priority. In your view, what is the most effective way to provide relief while balancing revenue needs for our schools, counties, and other entities that rely on property tax to maintain sustainable funding?
All right, well, the legislature is struggling with some history that kind of ties their hands. If you look at our Constitution, was written, it specifies how you should value property and so on. But that Constitution was written when gold was $20 an ounce, and then gold in the 30s became $35 an ounce, and then in 1973, inflation became the coin of the realm. And I spoke to that to the legislature this last session. The problem we have is as the cost of goods and services goes up for counties and schools, it's legitimate for them to get an increase in the revenues from the property taxes. However, we also see property taxes going up because of competition for other buyers for that property. And that's what the legislature is struggling with, is how do you divide that? They've taken various avenues, but the fundamental issue is the basic method of valuing property has to be changed. What's going on in Teton County as people are being pushed out is going to go on in the rest of the state. We've got to get down to brass tacks. There you have.
Our second question for today. Wyoming's population of those aged 60 and over grew by 47% from 2010 to 2020, while the state's entire population grew just 2%. We know 64% of all nursing home beds in Wyoming are paid for right now by the state's Medicaid program. What do you see as the greatest barrier to helping our older adults age in their homes and communities? And what solutions would you provide?
The greatest barrier turns out to be property taxes, I think. In going around and talking to people, I've run into a number of people that got pushed out of places, old line families in Teton County that got pushed out by the property tax issue. One of the things we have to be careful of is keeping elders in their own home is less expensive than it is to put them in an elder care facility. And yet, if we're pushing them out of their home, they're going to end up in the elder care facility. So how do we do that? What do we do? We've got to figure out how to take care of people that are on fixed incomes and that the property taxes are rising up underneath them. How do you do that? What do you do? There's some people proposing to not tax property after people are, say, age 65. There's other people proposing caps. There's a lot of work to be done, and I talked to that briefly in the previous thing that we did. And we've got to get down to brass tacks and figure out how to keep elders in their homes as long as medically possible. We've got to do that, and we haven't found a very good way yet. Some of the legislation this past time was vetoed by the governor. Thank you.
Our third question for today. Emergency medical services are not considered an essential service in Wyoming, and in some areas, ambulance services do not have a sustainable funding source. Over the last 10 years, Wyoming has seen 16 emergency medical service providers in the state fold or consolidate with another service. What solutions would you offer for ensuring access to ambulance services?
Well, the first thing is to call it an essential service. Here in Wyoming, people get injured in lots of places, and the funding for emergency medical services doesn't cover the cost of the EMS vans or the EMS personnel that man those vans to get them in and get them on down the road. And yet we still have various significant injuries amongst people in places out on the ranch. In industry, we're bringing industry in as we become more attractive to other parts of the country. So getting it down to brass tacks where you are going to call it an essential service, like the fire service or police, is just as important. Additionally, I've recently become aware that trauma surgeons from the our recent stuff in Iraq and Afghanistan are starting to go after whole blood available in EMS vans because a number of people will die from simply loss of blood. I'm going to work on that also. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Winney, for taking the time to answer our questions today. Now let's give you 2 minutes to explain to the voters why you think you're the best person to represent Senate District 14.
Well, I have studied our legislature and attended it for a number of years now. I've had some signal successes in speaking in public comment. One of them was computer science education in the state, where my thinking actually altered the fundamental way we go about teaching computer science in Wyoming. I've had some other successes, but the point being, I can speak well and clearly. I can get my point across in a couple minutes. You know, those legislatures kind of turn their eyes to the overhead when you go beyond about 3 or maybe 4 minutes. They got to be able to follow you. You got to be able to condense your answer into a couple minutes like you've just given me here. Secondly, elder care issues and income taxes and things like that. I should call it property taxes on your property. The legislature has struggled with property taxes. They've actually fiddled around with thinking about income taxes some years ago. That kind of died pretty quickly. But they're putting a lot of money into savings, and yet they're pushing elders out of their homes, and they're looking for other places to generate funding. And yet, at the end of the day, the issue is we also need to control spending, and I don't think the legislature has done very well at that. Along the way, I am going to work very hard for the nuclear plant that's being built in Kemmerer, Wyoming. I spent a career in the Navy nuclear propulsion program. I've been a chief engineer on a nuclear sub. I've commanded a nuclear sub, and I've commanded a large major nuclear repair facility across my career, along with budgeting in the Pentagon arena. That's why you should vote for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Winney, for your time today, and thank you to our viewers for joining us in this video voter's guide. We encourage you to keep checking Cowboy State Daily and AARP Wyoming's Facebook page for more video voter guides in the days to come.